Tupelo, Mississippi, September 12, 1948. 13-year-old. Elvis Presley was just a shy, awkward kid who got his first guitar for his birthday. But when he met 11-year-old Sarah May Collins behind the church after his very first public performance, what she whispered to him would plant the seed that grew into rock and roll history. September 12, 1948. The Tupelo County Fair was in full swing, and the air was thick with the smell of cotton candy, fried corn dogs, and the excitement of small-town America celebrating another harvest season. For most people attending the fair that day, it was just another pleasant Saturday afternoon. But for 13-year-old Elvis Presley, it was the day his entire life would change. Direction because of 5 simple words from a little girl he'd never met before. Elvis had been begging his mother, Gladys, for weeks to let him enter the youth talent competition at the fair. He'd been practicing with the guitar his parents had scraped together. Money to buy him for his 11th birthday, not the bicycle he'd originally wanted, but the guitar that his mother somehow knew would be more important. For 2 years, he'd been teaching himself to play, sitting on the front porch of their tiny 2-room house, picking out melodies he heard on the radio. Elvis stopped everything to notice one person's pain, and that's why we share these stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the moments that reveal the real man behind the legend. Most kids his age in Tupelo were more interested in baseball or fishing. But Elvis was different. He spent hours listening to the radio, absorbing every note of country music from the Grand Ole Opry, gospel from the local church services, and the blues that drifted over from the black section of town. His mother often found him sitting by their old Philco radio, eyes closed, completely lost in whatever music was playing. "That boy lives in music," Gladys would tell her neighbors, not quite understanding what that meant, but sensing it was important. The talent competition was being held on a small wooden stage set up near the livestock barn. It wasn't glamorous, just a makeshift platform with a single microphone and a handful of folding chairs for the judges. Most of the participants were older kids, teenagers who had been performing in school plays or church choirs for years. Elvis, with his slicked-back hair and shy demeanor, looked completely out of place among the confident performers. When his name was called, Elvis walked slowly to the microphone, carrying his guitar like it was the most precious thing in the world. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely tune the strings. The small crowd that had gathered, maybe 50, people including parents and curious fairgoers, watched with mild interest as this nervous kid adjusted the microphone stand. "What are you going to sing for us today, son?" asked Mrs. Henderson, the head judge and president of the Tupelo Women's Club. "Old Shep," Elvis answered in a voice so quiet that several people in the audience had to lean forward to hear him. It was a sad country song about a boy and his dog, made famous by Red Foley. Elvis had heard it countless times on the radio and had practiced it until he knew every word, every note, every emotional inflection. But standing on that stage, looking out at all those faces staring back at him, he felt like he might forget everything he'd ever learned. Then he spotted her in the crowd, a little girl with bright red pigtails and a yellow dress, standing slightly apart from her family, watching him with intense curiosity, rather than the polite disinterest of most of the other spectators. She couldn't have been more than 11 years old, but something about the way she was looking at him, like she was really seeing him, not just another nervous kid on stage, gave him courage. Elvis closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and began to sing. What happened next surprised everyone, including Elvis himself. As soon as he started singing, something magical occurred. His nervousness disappeared. His voice found its strength, and the shy, awkward boy transformed into something else entirely. The song poured out of him with an emotion and maturity that seemed impossible from someone so young. The crowd fell silent. Parents stopped chatting among themselves. Children stopped fidgeting. Even the carnival barkers in the distance seemed to quiet down as Elvis's voice carried across the fairgrounds. But it wasn't just his voice that captivated the audience. It was the way he performed. Without even realizing it, Elvis began moving to the rhythm, swaying slightly, tapping his foot, letting the music flow through his entire body. It was completely natural, completely unconscious, and completely different from anything anyone in Tupelo had ever seen before. When the song ended, there was a moment of stunned silence before the applause erupted. Elvis opened his eyes, blinking in surprise at the enthusiastic response. He'd expected polite clapping, maybe a few encouraging words. Instead, people were cheering, whistling, calling for another song. He won second place that day, earning $5 and a sense of possibility he'd never felt before. But the real prize was waiting for him behind the stage when the competition was over. As Elvis was packing up his guitar, still in a daze from his unexpected success, the little girl with the red pigtails appeared beside him. Up close, he could see she had bright green eyes and a spray of freckles across her nose. She was pretty in the way that only children can be, completely natural and unself-conscious. "Hi," she said simply. "I'm Sarah May Collins." "I'm Elvis," he replied, suddenly feeling shy again now that he was off stage. "Elvis Presley." "I know," Sarah May said matter-of-factly. "They announced your name. That was the most beautiful thing I ever heard." Elvis felt his cheeks burning with embarrassment and pride. No one had ever called his singing beautiful before. His mother said he had a nice voice, and his teacher, Mrs. Camp, had encouraged him to join the church choir, but no one had ever used the word beautiful. "Thank you," he managed to say. Sarah May stepped closer, and what she said next would echo in Elvis's mind for the rest of his life, shaping not just his career but his entire understanding of why music mattered. "When you were singing," she said, her young voice serious and thoughtful, "it made me feel like I wasn't alone anymore, like someone understood what it feels like to be sad sometimes." Elvis stared at her, not quite comprehending the depth of what she'd just told him. At 13, he didn't have the vocabulary to understand that Sarah May had just articulated the fundamental power of music, its ability to connect human hearts across all boundaries of age, race, class, and circumstance. "What do you mean?" he asked. Sarah May looked around to make sure no adults were listening, then leaned closer. "My daddy left last month," she whispered. "Mama says he's not coming back. She cries every night when she thinks I'm asleep. I cry too, but I try to be quiet so she doesn't know. But when you sang about old Shep dying, it felt like you knew how sad I was, like you were singing just for me." Elvis felt something shift inside his chest, a strange mixture of sadness for this little girl and amazement that his singing could somehow touch her pain. He'd always loved music because it made him feel good, made him forget about being poor or awkward or different. But he'd never considered that it might do the same thing for other people. "I'm sorry about your daddy," Elvis said softly. "It's okay," Sarah May replied with the resilience that children often show in the face of heartbreak. "But thank you for singing. It helped." Before Elvis could respond, Sarah May's mother appeared looking for her daughter. "Sarah May, there you are. We need to get going." As the woman approached, Sarah May quickly pressed something into Elvis's hand, a small piece of paper folded into a tight square. "Don't read it now," she whispered urgently. "Read it later when you're alone." Then she was gone, disappearing into the crowd with her mother, leaving Elvis standing alone behind the stage with his guitar in one hand and the mysterious note in the other. That evening, back in his family's tiny house on Old Saltillo Road, Elvis finally unfolded the note. In the careful cursive handwriting that children learn in school, Sarah May had written, "Dear Elvis, you have a gift that can make sad people feel better. Don't ever stop using it. The world needs more people who can sing like you do, with their whole heart. I will never forget how you made me feel today. Thank you for showing me that beautiful things can still happen even when everything seems broken. Your friend forever, Sarah May Collins." Elvis read the note 3 times, each time feeling more amazed by the wisdom contained in those simple sentences. This 11-year-old girl had somehow understood something that most adults never grasped, that music wasn't just entertainment. It was healing. It was connection. It was hope. He folded the note carefully and placed it in his wallet, where it would remain for the rest of his life. The impact of that encounter with Sarah May Collins was immediate and profound. The next day, Elvis asked his mother if he could perform at more local events. Within a month, he was singing at church gatherings, school assemblies and community picnics throughout Tupelo. But his approach to performing had changed completely. Instead of singing just to impress people or win competitions, Elvis began to sing with the conscious intention of reaching people emotionally, of connecting with anyone in his audience who might be feeling lost or lonely or sad. He would scan the crowd while he performed, looking for faces that reminded him of Sarah May, people who seemed to need the healing that music could provide. His reputation as a performer grew quickly throughout the region. People began to talk about the Presley boy who could make you cry with a ballad and make you want to dance with an up-tempo number. But more than that, they talked about how his music made them feel understood, comforted, less alone in the world. When Elvis was 14, his family moved to Memphis, leaving Tupelo behind in search of better opportunities. But he never forgot Sarah May Collins, or the lesson she taught him about the true purpose of music. In fact, as his career began to take off in Memphis, he often thought about that moment, behind the stage at the county fair when a little girl had shown him his calling. In 1954, when Elvis made his first recordings at Sun Records, he carried Sarah May's note with him to the studio. Sam Phillips, the owner of Sun Records, noticed that Elvis seemed to be singing not just to the microphone but to someone beyond it, someone he was trying to reach with his voice. That boy sings like he's trying to heal somebody. Phillips observed to his assistant, Marion Kieska, like every song is a conversation with someone who needs to hear it. It was exactly right. Elvis had learned from Sarah May that music was indeed a conversation, a way of reaching across the space between one human heart and another, offering comfort, understanding, and hope. As Elvis's career exploded in the mid-1950s, as he became first a regional sensation and then a national phenomenon, he never lost sight of the lessons Sarah May had taught him. Even when he was performing for screaming crowds of thousands, he would look for individuals in the audience who reminded him of that 11-year-old girl at the county fair, people who needed to feel less alone. His manager, Colonel Parker, never quite understood why Elvis insisted on making eye contact with individual audience members during his performances, why he seemed to be singing directly to specific people rather than to the crowd as a whole. But Elvis knew exactly what he was doing. He was following the instinct that Sarah May had awakened in him, the understanding that every person in his audience was carrying their own burdens, their own sadness, their own need for connection. In 1968, when Elvis made his famous comeback special on NBC television, he specifically requested that the show include intimate segments where he could sing directly to a small studio audience. During one of these segments, he performed If I Can Dream, a song about hope and healing that seemed to channel everything Sarah May had taught him 20 years earlier. After the taping, a journalist asked Elvis why he'd chosen to include those intimate performance segments in what was supposed to be a big, splashy television special. "Music isn't really about entertaining people," Elvis replied thoughtfully. "I mean, that's part of it, but the real purpose is deeper than that. Music is about reaching people who need to be reached, about making connections that might not happen any other way. Sometimes one person in the audience needs to hear exactly what you're singing, exactly when you're singing it. That's the magic of music. It finds the people who need it most." The journalist pressed further, asking where Elvis had learned to think about music in such personal, almost therapeutic terms. Elvis smiled, his hand unconsciously moving to his wallet where Sarah May's note still resided. After all these years, "A little girl taught me that," he said simply. "A long time ago when I was just starting out. She showed me that music isn't really about the performer. It's about the person listening who needs to feel less alone in the world." Elvis never publicly told the story of Sarah May Collins during his lifetime. It was too personal, too precious to share with reporters or biographers. But he never forgot her, and he never stopped carrying her note with him. In 1977, just days before his death, Elvis was going through his personal belongings at Graceland when he found Sarah May's note again. He read it one more time, marveling at how a child's simple wisdom had shaped his entire approach to music and performance. That same day, he called his longtime friend and spiritual advisor Larry Geller and shared the story of Sarah May Collins for the first time. "That little girl saved me before I even knew I needed saving," Elvis told Larry. "She taught me that talent without purpose is just noise. She showed me that every person who comes to hear you sing is carrying something: joy, sorrow, hope, despair, and your job as a performer is to acknowledge that, to speak to that, to help them feel less alone with whatever they're carrying." Larry was struck by the emotion in Elvis's voice as he told the story. "Did you ever try to find her again?" he asked. "Many times," Elvis replied. "But Collins is a common name, and Memphis is a big city. I always hoped she'd find me, maybe come to a concert or write a letter. I wanted to thank her for what she gave me that day." Unknown to Elvis, Sarah May Collins had indeed been following his career closely. Since that day at the Tupelo County Fair, she had married, become Sarah May Henderson, and raised 3 children while working as a school teacher in Jackson, Mississippi. She had attended several of Elvis's concerts over the years, always hoping he might somehow recognize her. But knowing that was impossible, she had kept a scrapbook of Elvis's career, newspaper clippings, and magazine articles that she collected not as a fan but as someone who felt personally invested in his success. Every time she read an interview where Elvis talked about the emotional power of music, about his desire to connect with his audience on a deep level, she remembered that conversation behind the stage in Tupelo. After Elvis's death in 1977, Sarah May finally wrote a letter to Graceland, sharing her memory of that day at the county fair and explaining how her brief encounter with a 13-year-old boy had convinced her that he was destined for something special. The letter reached Priscilla Presley, who was moved to tears by Sarah May's story. Priscilla immediately called Sarah May and arranged for her to visit Graceland. During that visit, Priscilla showed Sarah May Elvis's wallet, which still contained the carefully preserved note she had written almost 30 years earlier. "He carried this with him everywhere," Priscilla explained. "He told me once that it reminded him why he sang, not for fame or money, but to reach people who needed to be reached." Sarah May held her childhood note with trembling hands, amazed that such a small gesture had traveled with Elvis throughout his incredible journey. "I was just a little girl trying to say thank you," Sarah May said through her tears. "I had no idea it would mean so much to him." "That's exactly why it meant everything," Priscilla replied. "It was honest. It was real. It came from the heart." Elvis spent his whole career trying to preserve that kind of authentic connection with people. Today, Sarah May's note is displayed in a place of honor at Graceland, part of an exhibit about the personal items that Elvis treasured most. The exhibit explains how a chance encounter between a 13-year-old boy and an 11-year-old girl at a small-town county fair helped shape one of the most influential musical careers in history. But perhaps more importantly, the story of Elvis and Sarah May Collins has become a powerful reminder of how a single moment of genuine human connection can plant seeds that grow into something beautiful and transformative. Music educators and therapists now use their story as an example of how artistic expression can serve a higher purpose, not just as entertainment, but as a form of healing and connection. The Sarah May Collins Foundation, established by her children after her death in 2010, provides music therapy programs for children dealing with family trauma and loss. The Foundation's mission statement, inspired by that long-ago conversation at the Tupelo County Fair, reads, "Music has the power to make people feel less alone. When we share our gifts with authenticity and compassion, we can reach across any distance to touch another person's heart." Every year on September 12th, the anniversary of that first meeting, music students and Elvis fans gather at the site of the old Tupelo County Fair to celebrate what they call First Fan Day. The event features performances by young musicians who are encouraged to sing, not just for applause, but for the person in the audience who most needs to hear their music. At each first Fan Day celebration, someone reads aloud the note that 11-year-old Sarah May Collins wrote to 13-year-old Elvis Presley, reminding everyone present that the most powerful music comes not from technical perfection or commercial ambition, but from the simple desire to connect one human heart to another. The story of Elvis and Sarah May Collins proves that sometimes the most important moments in our lives happen when we're still children, when we're brave enough to speak honestly about what moves us and generous enough to encourage others to share their gifts with the world. It reminds us that behind every great artist is usually someone who saw their potential before they saw it themselves, someone who took the time to say, "What you just did mattered. What you just shared made a difference." Don't ever stop using that gift. And perhaps most importantly, it shows us that the true measure of any artist's success isn't found in record sales or awards or fame, but in their ability to make another person feel less alone in the world, one song at a time. That day at the Tupelo County Fair, a little girl named Sarah May Collins planted a seed that would grow into one of the most powerful forces in music history. She taught a 13-year-old boy that his gift wasn't just about entertaining people, it was about healing them. If this story moved you, imagine how many other hidden moments shaped Elvis into the artist we remember today. Subscribe to Elvis Presley Legacy Stories, because these are the chapters that reveal how legends are really born, not through fame or fortune, but through simple human connections that change everything. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that their voice matters, that their gifts can heal, and that sometimes the most important thing we can do is tell another person that what they just shared made us feel less alone.